Welcome once again to The Lost Signals discusses games and gaming culture, a pretentious, philosophical, pedantic podcast where we focus on various aspects of video games as well as other issues and topics within gaming in general. Hello there, welcome back to The Lost Signals, games and gaming culture, and I am the future, and it is now. I am Scott Thurlow, here with Stephen Amosi.
How you doing? Looking forward.
And Jonathan Ian Menzer.
And I'm the past.
Mm-hmm. And we were going to discuss, originally, it's still going to be next-gen hype, like the new consoles, but I've called it what we know for now, what they've showed off, pretty much. Which, it's a bit of, it's not as much as you might think. And granted, I think Microsoft is supposed to show off, or literally just talking precast, just having their showcase, but we're discuss, what they have shown off and, what some of the features are promising to be, etc. So it's going to be the PlayStation 5 versus the Xbox Series X, which also might have different iterations as well, different possible variations on that name. So yeah, the window is ostensibly they're both going to release. Here's what we do know: they're both going to release. And in a second I'll let E talk about the actual specs and stuff. But general information is that they're going to be competing in the holiday season. So let's probably call it November-ish, October maybe, right? That's probably when they'll release, the end of this year. And the price points are still uncertain. There's been conjectures. There's been quote-unquote leaks of the price leaked on Amazon or whatever, some other retailer. But for the large part, it's probably a placeholder even at that. But I think so I'll lead off with one thing and then we'll sort of evolve as we go along. But I think the thing that's most interesting to me, or at least perhaps possibly the coolest thing they're going to do, is that at least Xbox said it more, but both of them, let's say, all right, so it's basically upgrading your gen. So let's say Cyberpunk is a good example. Cyberpunk's coming out also in November. In theory, if I buy a copy of Cyberpunk for the current Xbox One now, I will get a free upgrade. Anyone will get it will upgrade that game when and if you do get the new gen console, which I think is pretty cool. Right, same thing applies. I think they're doing with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a couple of games like that, pretty big name, well-known AAA stuff has officially committed to being if you get it on this, and then if you upgrade your console, you will get a free version of the upgraded game as well.
Well, if I may comment on that, I feel like we're bearing the lead on the actual discussion of the consoles
I want to start out with something.
But there has been a push for backward compatibility in these consoles for a very long time. And supposedly both the Xbox X Series X, Xbox X,
XX,
and the PS5 are going to have backward compatibility to them. So it makes sense that they would have the automatic upgrade to them, because it's superfluous otherwise.
Yes, no, I think that's certainly a true point. But and backwards compatibility was the next thing on my list. Speaking of that, so again, they both promised it, but if you read between the fine print between the lines, Sony has said the top 100 most popular PS games. So people based on what? I guess time played, right? Just volume of players. That's what they said so far.
So it's not entirely backwards compatible.
Yeah, it's not their whole games. Library. Exactly. Probably God of War. The big ones you can probably think off the top of your head certainly will be there. But they haven't said, it's not as extensive, so it seems, allegedly, versus Microsoft saying, almost every Xbox One game will work, and some 360 as well will be backwards compatible. That's what they've claimed. But that's one of the big differences, one of the, again, somewhat unknowns from what they've said so far.
I wonder how much support they'll have to do to get these, to make the games backward compatible.
They haven't said much about it. That's not interesting.
Oh, go on.
Well, I was going to say, that's an interesting question, because the PS2, I think, was entirely backwards compatible to PS1. Mm-hmm. Every PS1 game,
was that the case? I
believe so.
Okay.
Maybe not, but I think it was. And I guess the question is how much work does it take to? Do you have to like completely make those games in a way to like make them backwards compatible, or is it just like some simple tweaking? Because like, you know, you just put in a PS1 disc into your PS2 and it worked, right? Like,
yep, sure.
It would just play it at the same.
But most PS2s were completely backwards compatible with most PS1. There were outliers, but
well, like that's. I wonder what it takes to make it backwards compatible, because I was under the impression, I guess, at the time. And I really haven't thought about it much since then, because they haven't done a ton of backwards compatibility in any system since then. Like, I was under the impression that you just made your current hardware able to play the last software and you were good to go. Like, I didn't realize that you had to do something for each game, but maybe that's the case. We have to like actually make it so that each game, you have to manually make each game backwards compatible, which makes it a whole lot of a bigger undertaking, right?
Well, I'm not sure, and that's the thing. I imagine that different games might have...
They've been pretty tight-lipped about that
or have been constructed with perhaps different features. And so, I know more about, in a sense, making older PC games run, or making Windows games run on Linux and things like that, versus than I do about consoles. But there might be the case that, like, for instance, here's actually a good example of it. You have games like Rock Band and things like that, which have accessories that you plug in. Those might require complete like hardware or specialized software to make it compatible with working with the consoles. So
yeah, for sure.
You guys raise a good point for sure. Like, and we're not the devs, so we don't know for sure, like 100%, like how it works in the nitty gritty of that, like how much work it does take to like tweak it or whatever. Steve, right? Like make the code work so that it runs an older version of it. In theory, you would think you're like, oh, it can't be that hard, but it might depend. Like, again, technology marches on, science marches on, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it is like partially like you have to make sure that whatever that software was, whatever, you know, build-ins that software is using are available in with your new gaming system, right? Like, I'm sure it's all I'm sure they all ran off of a bunch of really antiquated stuff now that just isn't there anymore. So you have to like build in, I don't even know like what it would be, but like you have to build in those libraries that allow you to run that software, you know?
Sure. It's almost like making an emulator, but like it's much more than that, you know, it would seem. But again, like, so I'll toss it to you in a sec, because I'm just going to mention, from what has been shown and like from like the limited like testimonials, the consensus seems to be that on paper, if you just compare the actual specs that again have been released, that information that's available, is that Microsoft's the Series X has like a slight edge in like raw power, like just straight up stuff. But that's it's a misleading statement. Like, don't get me wrong, because there's been testimonials like a handful of devs have got their hands on the PS5 like test kit, and said like, yeah, it's much more like plastic, like it's more malleable. We can use we can do a lot more within it, even if it's like slightly less, like raw processing power, rendering power, etc. So
what I'm going to talk about right now is strictly the consoles with the disc included. And one of the big, I think, changes that are going on is the digital versions versus the hard disk.
Yeah, I think it's a good time. Yep, good.
And that's actually a discussion I think we should have a little bit later on. But I just want to talk about the raw specs right now. So both have an 8-core processor. Or I thought that both of them had an 8-core processor. I believe that the Xbox is slightly faster, like 3.8 gigahertz versus 3.5 gigahertz, something around that, but it's very similar. However, I believe the GPU for the PS5 is slightly more powerful. They have the same 16 gigabytes of RAM. I believe the Xbox has slightly more storage than but
that too,
not it's still a huge storage space for both. And overall, it seems that they're on par with power to each other. Perhaps one has an advantage over the other in a certain situation, but it's they don't seem, from the specs I've read, to be all that dissimilar. And for the average user, I don't think there would be too much of a notice. This is different when it comes to the digital version of it, but for the both of the hard drive console, or not hard drive, disc consoles, you would get a similar experience.
Yeah, in theory, on paper, like they're pretty, like whatever differences there are, like minimal. It seems
that might also be going. And I don't know if you're going to talk about the idea of. Yes, go on.
I just want to clarify a point earlier. I when you mentioned the 8 cores, I looked it up. So both have.
They will have SSDs.
AMD Zen 2 CPUs with 8 cores and 16 threads.
Yeah.
Microsoft is reserving 1 core and 2 threads for the operating system and front-end shell, meaning that they have 7 cores left. I guess I don't have anything about PlayStation. But, yeah, that's to clarify.
They might not even said, again, like, this is what we know. And, like, granted, it's some stuff, but not a lot. So, like, I'm just throwing, like, they both confirmed to have built-in SSD drives. Like, okay, like, sure. Yeah. That's like, so it's comparable in that sense. But yeah, so you mentioned it, E, so let's maybe delve into it a bit in a second.
Well, I just want to say that I think that's part of the rush to own licenses in order for gaming. Because I think that power level, these are going to be on the same level. Right.
They're pretty much roughly comparable, it seems. But I do think, since you brought it up, so I'll introduce it and then we'll talk about it, that I think for the first time, just because, again, of the march of science, technology, etc., that they're going to offer a digital, like, only version of the consoles, and then one that accepts physical discs as well, which in theory, like, one would be cheaper than the other because it's cheaper to produce, doesn't have to handle, doesn't even have a disk drive, really.
Yeah.
So, like, that, like, I kind of like that on the surface, even though if I personally probably would I still prefer one that would run both, like, just because that's the way I've always done things. I still prefer disc copies right now, but I still think it's like maybe a nice little, like, middle gap, if you will. Like, if you're not that big of a gamer and you want to save a little bit of money, go ahead, Steve-O.
I was going to say, here's why I think it's kind of bullshit. An optical drive is like a $10 piece of equipment, and they're going to sell those fucking systems for $100 more than the non-optical drives because they really want to push digital media because they can control it better.
That is a good point.
Too. And that really is annoying. And the fact that they're both going to do that. Like, there's a reason that I got a PlayStation 4 over an Xbox One, and it was because Xbox One was pushing cameras and all that other bullshit on me when I didn't really want it. In this case, it's almost the opposite, where it's like you could provide this at the same exact price and it wouldn't really hurt your bottom line, but like you're not doing that specifically because you want to sell these. To be honest, like, the hardware is always sold at a loss, right? For any of this stuff, what they make money on is the software.
Yeah,
is
right.
The games themselves.
Absolutely.
So, like, the reason that they're selling this for $100 more is because obviously they want to make back a little bit of that bottom line for the people that are, like, hardcore into having discs, and also because they really don't want you to have discs because they can control your media a lot better if you don't have discs, if you just have digital video.
Right, and it might be its own conversation, Goody.
And perhaps this, because I think this is an inevitability that this is the first foray into switching to digital only.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yes, you're right. It is all about control. It's about selling more. So you can't give me your copy like what we're doing with Maneater right now.
Yeah.
But it is more environmentally friendly. Not producing discs and selling them.
Don't be wrong. There's two sides to it, of course.
I just wanted to give that caveat. If you're interested, I still think of the AOL discs and all the landfills from back in the
all the ET cartridges.
And not having those would benefit, but you're right about control.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a double-edged sword because, on top of that, Steve-O, just to add on to your point, is that, for example, like, let's say something goes massively, like something with the servers goes awry or whatever, they get hacked. Like, where'd all my games go, right? I can't be paid for all this shit, and it's in my library. They always say that to you, but if it gets removed or is no longer supported, then, like, it's basically fuck you.
Yeah. Hope you got your PS4 to pull out and play some old games.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wanted to also, since we're talking about hardware a little bit, I stumbled upon this good article that gives, like, a lot of the specs and stuff. So it's a Forbes article
I think I might have read that one too.
They're talking about the GPU at this point. So we moved past the CPU into the GPU, and it's interesting. So like the compute units in the PS5 are faster, but there are fewer of them. So the setup in the Series X produces 12 teraflops, while the PS5 is rated at 10.28 teraflops, which is like a fucking gigantic amount of processing power. Like regardless, like both of them are going to be amazing in terms of this. In fact, what I really loved in the PS5 videos was Ratchet and Clank. They did a video where
they compared the load times, because
there aren't any load times. It's the craziest thing, right? Like they like literally like jump between universes, and you're like in a new place,
right?
As you like tumble out of the previous universe. It's crazy. Like the load time is the times, like the 1.5 seconds spent in the abyss of like traveling in between one place and another. You still see your character like tumbling, right? And then you're in a completely new universe. Which is crazy.
Like loading hint screen or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, something you could never do before.
But again, I think that the average user wouldn't see much of a performance difference between the two.
Right.
Or wouldn't, yeah.
In theory, right? Like, yeah, again, they're close enough. But I mean, that's been a big selling point. Like, they're trying to be like, no loading times, right? Because of the, like you said, the leap in processing power and all that.
It reminds me of the back in the day where we're 16-bit, we're 32-bit, and the bit wars.
Yeah,
now it's
like,
the teraflops.
It's like the frames per second war now. Oh, we're rendered at 60 FPS. Oh, 120, like whatever.
Yeah, right? It's absolutely the processing power and the hard drive speed, where you can load something off an SSD so fucking fast. Yeah. I don't know if anybody has an SSD in their computer.
I do,
but
I do not. But
it's amazing. Like,
I know.
You remember waiting like 3 minutes for your fucking operating system to load? Now you can't even like see the Windows screen anymore. It's crazy how fast it is.
No, I feel you. So you mentioned Ratchet and Clank. Oh, sorry. Did you? Anything else?
Oh, I do want to talk about, if we can move into digital for a second, because I saw a video today, and this isn't confirmed. This is kind of speculation on this, but what is confirmed is that the digital edition of the PS5 is going to be almost exactly the same as the same, except it's just missing the disc drive with it. It's probably going to sell for about $100 cheaper. There's the prices that they're speculating at is about like $500 for the discs, and about $400 for the.
That's what the safe
digital
money seems to be on, if you will. Yeah.
And that seems about the right. Actually, I happen to think that PS is floating prices out there to see what the response is. Yeah. But now, what's very interesting though is that the Xbox Project Lockhart or the Xbox Series Tifo, whatever you is supposed to be actually much cheaper. About they're expecting $300 for it,
for the digital only.
It's going to be it's going to be improvement over the Xbox One, but it's going to be a significant difference between the Series X and its digital version.
That's interesting. I did not come across that in my stuff.
But what was neat was that they the first time I've heard of this was the APU, which is the accelerated processing unit.
Accelerated processing unit,
which basically combines the use of a CPU with a GPU in one unit, and there is supposed to be a significant difference. And there's actually quite a few fears that you're in a sense wasting your money, because that's going to be almost like it's going to quickly go out of date when people are making games for the Xbox Series X that don't run as well on the digital edition. But that's speculation. But that'd be very interesting if that happens.
That's pretty wild.
It's certainly a good point, because I guess if you're more like casual owner, like, I don't mean to be that in an insulting term, but sometimes it just naturally is.
If they're trying to do, but if they're attempting to create a casual version of the Xbox, like almost a Wii type,
or a Switch or something,
Switch is the handheld, right?
Switch was the newest version of Nintendo, basically.
But to have a more casual fan base thing, fair enough,
But sure, like you're saying, like there's probably going to be a noticeable difference between, at least in that sense. And I mean, I can see that. But I mean, I don't begrudge them that, like, it's fine that they're going to do that, because it is like sort of a nice middle ground if you're not as much of as big gamers as we might be, or like people in our circle, right?
But I think it's important for people to
know that.
To go and say, like, if I was young and my parents were like, well, we got you the Xbox S or whatever
digital one,
like, oh no, I wanted to play this high end game, and I'm not going to be able to.
I would think that this is going to be like more of a problem towards the later stages of this console's life as opposed to the earlier ones, right? I feel like all the early games will play on both of them just fine. But I think that like as the years go by, you're going to find that you have significant issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're saying that the longevity of the Project Lockhart is going to be, but it's speculation.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys this question. Here's something I've been thinking about lately. Do you think that for the first time in like 3 console generations, they are going to raise the price of games? Or you think they're going to stick with 60?
I don't think so, Steve-O. That could probably be its own conversation, but to answer like,
has it always been 60? I remember like SNES games being.
I want to say SNES and Nintendo are like 50.
Yeah,
it's been pretty close for like.
But that's crazy. That's like $50 then is so much different than it is now.
And the length of an SNES game versus the length of a game nowadays.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. But I guess here's I guess like it goes back to maybe a couple of other conversations we had, episodes we've done. A lot of games companies try to make it up in microtransaction, all that kind of bullshit, right? So like, yes, while the base price has remained roughly $60, that's like the shell price, if you will. Like that's the basis for not all games, certainly, but some. So like, I haven't heard much thing like, oh, games like cost so much more to produce. Like that's really not.
But we've also had an indie renaissance going on as well. So there's actually a market to fight the AAA.
Like downshift in pricing,
yeah. Because like I mean, let's say you're an small indie studio and you're making like a retro game for the new gen consoles. Like that's not gonna. It's still gonna be cheaper because you're not trying to render like and all the ray tracing glory and all that, which we haven't even mentioned. Things like that, right? So like, you don't need to like really budget that in because it's not going to be like relevant to your game because of the style and the nature that what you're working in.
Do you think they'll still do free game giveaways monthly?
Yes, I'll get to that. Yes. I actually want to talk about it a bit quickly since you mentioned it. Yes. So for what it seems to be, so it's a little bit personal thing to me. I'm wavering on whether to switch or whether to go back to Xbox because the Game Pass service has been pretty fucking solid. Like if you look at how they do it, you get a lot more like versus what we've been getting through Sony. Like Sony's PSN is fine. Like, don't get me wrong, it's 2 games per month, and like usually they're pretty solid. But for example, if I'm on Game Pass, some of the Microsoft's like big name titles like Gears, I don't have to buy Gears. Like in theory, one does not have to buy Gears. If you're a member of Game Pass, you get it as part of the Game Pass service.
Well, that's a monthly fee, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing as PSN. It's just that like that's a new game. PSN does not give out new games. You know what I mean? Like if Microsoft drops a new Halo Infinite. If you're part of Game Pass, you get it as part of Game Pass.
I thought it was Xbox Live and then Game Pass was a separate thing. Is that not?
Yeah, I mean,
true anymore.
It is like it's weird.
Well, there's the PS. There's multiple versions of the PS thing.
Yeah, there's a similar thing for PS too.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid levels of service. Like they're called something similar. But to answer your question, Steve, like they all offering that, and they're going to keep doing it. And it also ties in something else I want to talk about, which I want in a second. But to address it. It seems that it's a more robust service, and the way they're doing it to entice people, be like, hey, sign up for Game Pass Live or whatever they're fucking calling it.
PS Now, I think it is.
Yeah, it's PS Plus and PS Now again, which I think they're 2 different things they call them. But I'm saying like that's not a bad deal either. Like they give out like it's part of the service. As long as you're subscribed to it monthly or yearly or whatever it is, right? If you're at that level of it. Mm-hmm. You just get these games, like, regardless. You don't have to buy them separately. Now, granted, it goes back to the digital download thing. It's not like they're sending you a disc copy. Of course, you just download it. But you do have access to, like, some really big-name first-party titles as part of your Game Pass service or subscription.
But that's the same thing, like, you have access to big-party titles in terms of if you subscribe to, what is it, PS Plus or whatever, as opposed to PSN or whatever, like whatever we have, the normal PlayStation thing.
Is Xbox Gold is the Xbox Plus, or no, PlayStation Plus.
Yeah.
And the PlayStation Now is the Game Pass.
Right. It's all like, again, it's almost like meant to confuse consumers.
So I have the standard, I think we all do have the standard like PlayStation subscription, which is like $60 a year.
Mm-hmm.
you get those 2 free games a year or a month or whatever, and they're mostly not great, but some of them are pretty good. And,
I mean, it depends, but
and that's pretty much what you get from it, right? Like, I don't think you get too much more out of that, but like,
yeah, no, not really, right? Like, but I'm as far as I understand and have talked to other people who, like, for example, our friend Mikey G and a couple others. So it seems that the Xbox, at least Microsoft service, is more robust. They offer you more of a range of titles for that level of subscription, or roughly the equivalent. But
the Live and Plus are the exact same thing. They get 2 free games per month. You get cloud storage, things like that.
All
right. Xbox Game Pass and Xbox and PS Now are the exact same thing.
All right. So maybe
I think that's what it is, right? Like, it's like, what do you like, the games that Xbox gives you better, or do you like the games that PlayStation gives you better? Like, I think they offer pretty much the same deals, right? But like, and the other thing with Mikey, I know he's always been a Xbox guy, but the reason that I switched off of Xbox, I had an Xbox 360 and I had a PlayStation 3. I played the Xbox 360 a lot more. The reason that I became an Xbox or a PlayStation 4 player was because I didn't like what Xbox was doing right when they released the One.
Sure. I mean, they fucked up the launch of One. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's agreed upon. Like, they just handled it horribly and announced it, and all these features that people didn't want, like the always online thing and all that DRM shit. Sure.
Yeah. To be honest, it's going to take a swapping of that happening. Like, right? I don't think that I would need Sony to fuck up the launch of PS5 and Xbox to do a decent job on PS5 for me to switch back at this point. I think I'm going to stick with Sony until it happens, which, like, I was an Xbox. I would have bought the Xbox One over a PS4 for sure.
For that, you're saying?
But they fucked up. And like, when you fuck up, I'm going to fucking go with, they're both fairly similar in terms of gameplay and stuff. Like, PlayStation just did a better job with their new controller, and the new controller for PlayStation 5 looks awesome, by the way. I guess we should probably talk about that at some point. But
yeah, we'll get to it. But you gave me a good segue, so I kind of want to tie it together. So it's again somewhat of a personal thing for me. But for example, it goes back to the exclusivity thing. And yes, to address what you just said, Stevo, yeah, like Microsoft bungled the launch of it. They had a huge blowback. And therefore, they were like, I think they felt they were tainted by that. So now with this new gen, they feel like, okay, we can't make that mistake again. We have to be clear about it. We're not doing any of that like jerk-offy bullshit like that people never asked for and don't want, and thought it was intrusive, etc. But the thing is, to me, so I have the most notes on it. Microsoft bought like a bunch of formerly third-party studios, and like 4 to the 5 of them are ones I really love, which implies, of course, they're going to be Microsoft exclusives from now on. Mm-hmm. So, like, it's going to be a factor for me. Now, granted, Sony also has some big name stuff, too. They still have Spider-Man. They have Ratchet & Clank, you mentioned. They have Horizon as your background if anyone's watching this. But, like, Microsoft picked up In Exile. They picked up Ninja Theory, Obsidian. Obsidian is huge. Double Fine. They picked up, like, these well-known and respected and beloved, again, formerly third-party indie studios that are now going to be under the banner, and that's going to, like, at least make me think twice about which one, if I'm going to have to choose one, at least at the outset, which one to pick first, because I know I'm going to want to play almost any game that those studios make, and they're certainly not going to be cross-platform.
It's wild. It seems like it's beginning of the return to exclusivity. Right,
yeah, and I don't know how to feel about that.
When you can't compete on hardware, you only have the quality of your games you're playing.
Certainly a fine point. So
it's interesting because, like, that was a big thing. Is that I was happy when PlayStation and Xbox, when they were both getting kind of the same games, because, like, you think back, like, you missed out on a ton of games if you were a Nintendo or Super Nintendo owner and you didn't have Sega, or vice versa. So, like,
maybe you can play Aladdin on both.
You could play Aladdin
super different though,
but you couldn't play Sonic on both, and you couldn't play Mario on both. Like, I was glad when a lot of those titles started becoming like cross-platform, multi-platform games, and it seems like we might be going back towards like a exclusivity type of thing.
Back and forth, sure.
that's maybe,
actually that's good for the developers in a sense, because then you could see Sony putting more money towards developers to produce better games, or Microsoft putting and building a greater I like the fight for the best type of games, the best stories.
But I'll say this: if Sony had ever developed a game, it would be a PlayStation game, right? Like, they're not the ones that are developing it. They're just like saying, "Hey, we want to buy you, company, so that you can't produce for Xbox." That doesn't mean necessarily they're going to throw money into that game. That just means that they're going to try and get it to be exclusive.
Yeah. And I think it's both, because they're gonna. I don't think they're just gonna cut them adrift. Like, okay, we bought you, now we're gonna support you. Like, the whole point of that is to garner.
I don't think they're buying those companies, though, right? Are they?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
It's literally that's a Sony company now. It's not like, hey, we're gonna pay you to be exclusive to us.
It depends. Sometimes,
you're right. It varies like studio to studio, Steve. But for the most part, Microsoft, at least the ones I just mentioned, at least in this instance for them, Obsidian is now probably going to make games exclusive to Windows and or Xbox, right? They're not going to, probably within their contract, Microsoft says you cannot produce a game that will work, that will release on a competing console or whatever. And that sort of, again, stops me in my track, just because the ones I happen to buy are ones that I like a lot. I'm a big fan of, and produce the games that I like to play. So I'm just saying that might, it's going to have a non-zero weight, if you will, when debating which one, again, if I am going to choose. Now, perhaps at this point in my life, I might just be financially sound enough to be able to get both, so it might be a moot point. But it's not, again, it's not a non-consideration in that sense. Because
that's still $1,000 purchase or $900 or whatever,
And again, to quickly go back to what you said, it seems to me why would they spend all the money on the outset, purchasing it, if they're not going to also support these studios to make, again, specific games or games specific to them, right? It seems like,
why would they? They've never supported them before, and they've always put out fine games. All you have to do is spend the amount of money they need to spend so that they can't put out shit on another platform and then just call it a
Obsidian is now part of Microsoft Studios.
Okay, yes, so they are under Microsoft's banner. Yeah, all right, that makes sense.
So in that case, they will give them a big.
Yeah, but now the games you liked aren't coming back into style. It's going to be Microsoft's.
Those aren't Obsidian games anymore. They're Microsoft games now.
Maybe, but it depends how hands-on or hands-off they aren't. That remains to be seen. Certainly, don't get me wrong.
I feel Bill Gates is pretty hands-on.
Bill Gates hasn't been hands-on in 20 years.
But anyway, I just wanted to.
He's too busy fighting malaria, which is good for him.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just perhaps again, like you said, the new exclusivity divide, if there is going to be one, which I think there is going to be to some degree, at least, because of the fact that they snapped up these studios 2 or 3 years ago.
For instance, I heard rumors that Sony was attempting to buy Castlevania licensing and create a Dark Souls on its own. So you could see, in a sense, the console wars actually producing their own games too. And also, Sony is creating the its own streaming service too.
Yeah, it's in the works, so they claim. Again, that remains to be seen as well. But I feel
like they tried this once before. We'll see how it goes.
They tried something like it.
Powers was great until Michael Madsen.
Fair. I think that it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. And in terms of TV programming, I assume that Microsoft's not far behind. So I think that they'll both probably not be great, but if they can turn out a 1 or 2 good series, I'll be all right with it.
We'll see. They've been supposed to be making a Halo thing forever. I don't know if they're still doing it a series or in some sense. But maybe
gotta hire Frank Darabont
if they can afford him. But not
and I got him for Walking Dead.
I guess it's true. But as a caveat, it's now about late summer, or not even it's about to be July on the date of this recording, and in July. In July. And certainly, we'll probably see more reveals, of course, as it gets closer and closer to the holiday release date. Well, I'm saying, on the outset, this is what we know, what they've shown off so far, and what has happened like in the past 2-3 years leading up to the new gen, next gen console release / war scuffle, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
kerfuffle. I like.
Yeah, by the time, in 3 months from now, this whatever we are saying some of it might be out of date, or at least be updated. But
the world might be over in 3 months. It's 2020.
Who the fuck knows? Yeah.
And that was the last thing I had. Like, I had virus delays or roadblocks ? Like, which might impact again production or distribution, etc.
The march of progress is not stopped by much.
I guess not.
Yeah.
Well, maybe like, hey, you might get that digital one because that way it's easy. You don't have to produce as many physical copies.
You don't have to go like actually have a handoff.
Yeah.
But
I don't know, man. Like, that's pretty much. I think we covered like what information there is and some interesting things like that within that. If you guys got anything else that I didn't mention or you wanted to mention specifically about the next gen
God of War 5/9.
God of War Ragnarok.
If they don't make the next God of War at minimum as good as the last God of War, I'll be very upset. I'm looking forward to exploring all the other worlds
that they promise you.
I'm looking forward to killing Thor.
Yeah,
fuck Chris Hemsworth.
That's not the next one. You got to wait like 2 more.
No.
Maybe then because you kill Thor, then you kill Odin. Obviously, yeah. Probably you were going to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
the ending of that one was Thor showing up.
Yep.
So
true. It might be Thor next one, and then Odin the next one after that. You're right.
Yeah, I would guarantee you. I would bet you anything. They've been working on Santa Monica's been working on that game since probably for 2-3 years or whatever.
I'm excited. The first revamp was amazing. So
yeah, and it was mysteriously absent from the PS showcase that just happened a couple weeks ago. So like that might be one to like. Oh, again, as it gets closer, like, by the way.
Well, I think that their showcase was actually. I didn't watch the Xbox one, but I watched the PlayStation one. Their showcase was Horizon Zero Dawn, and I don't think they wanted to have a real conflict with that game because I feel that they feel that's the future. So
yeah, it certainly seemed to be that way. But yeah, I mean, again, we'll see as it comes out. But I'm still. At least myself personally, I'm still kind of wavering looking at the information as it trickles out, if you will, and what they have shown so far. But I'm still, of course, like cautiously optimistic about it. I'm certainly going to get one, if not both, again, if possible. And
it's very possible.
Yeah. And we'll see, like, even like, for example, a random thing, like Res Evil has been announced. The next Res Evil 8/Village, as they're stylizing it. I believe they've said...
No, it's 8-inch.
8-inch, yes, that's right. Sure.
8-inch?
Well,
because they're using the VI as the 8 in like the if you look at the actual script,
Gotcha.
It's like 7 the movie where they have put the number in the middle there.
Interesting.
But anyways,
somebody got really clever.
Yeah, I mean they did it with
perhaps too clever.
They did it with Resident Evil 7, and they're like, oh, that was great. Let's do it again. But no, I'm just saying like they've announced that like as a 2020, like an early 2021 release. For both, so like it's like rapidly approaching, and like I feel as if sort of a last thing when this console, like PS4 generation, there weren't that many. The library of launch titles for both consoles was like all right, it was fine, but I feel like this time they shown off like okay, we're gonna have a really good. Both of them are like we need to have a solid library at launch, like 4 or 5 titles at least that are like not. Like what we think might be killer apps, if you will, like must-have titles that will compete with each other. Whereas I think I feel like last generation there was like I don't know. 2,
I feel almost
maybe.
like I haven't been blown away by like launch titles since PS1 and original Xbox.
Blown away by the Ratchet and Clank one.
Oh, I mean, the new showcase looks pretty good. We'll see how it plays out, but like. I feel like in previous generations, the last one that I was like really floored by was like PS1 and the original Xbox.
No,
like
I get what you mean. I feel you.
PS2, Xbox 360, like Halo was like the biggest title. I guess
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't know. Maybe it was better than I'm remembering, but.
I mean, maybe it's kind of always a problem. Like when they switch when they switch gens, they're like, all right, we need to show off something, but maybe other devs are trepidatious. And here's one more thing: like the thing that's always in the back of my mind in any new generation is like the red ring of deaths. Like, what if there's some huge, like, big, wide-ranging bug that fucks everyone's shit up? Like, should I wait?
That's why I'm doing PlayStation.
Should I wait 2 or 3 months for all of them to get ironed out? Like, on launch week, if thousands of people, millions of people are like, hey,
just bricks your system.
You're bricking my console. Yeah, exactly.
Not like it's completely unheard. Like nothing in that wide ranging thing, but like not like it's completely unheard of for shit like that.
Exactly. No, like that's always something that
you get a warranty though. You get a 1-year warranty with every.
Sure, but then I have to ship it back, whatever. Like like fix it, boys. Like make it work already, like beforehand. I don't know. But I think that's all pretty much. You got anything else? I think that's all. They're all there is to say, because given what we do know, which again is some stuff, but not a lot. And like I said, certainly we'll get more as it goes along, as the year unfolds. But that's what's been released that they've shown off so far, and or leaked, or at least conjectured and so forth. And yeah, there's going to be, like you said, Steve, there will be a showcase. Microsoft is going to have one like in a couple of weeks, like mid-July or something. Mm-hmm. So like maybe again, I'll wrap that up and fold it in a later episode. But for now, that's sort of what we know, where it stands, and what we think about it. So again, cautiously optimistic, as I somewhat always am, at least in terms of things like this. And that's basically what we know about it and what we can say about it.
My prediction, though, this is the year Jaguar makes a return.
I can't wait.
If they do somehow, if that comes out of nowhere to resurge, then that's a good bet. It's good long odds on that. But either way, I think that will do it for tonight for this episode. I am Old Gen Hype. I've been Scott Thurlow, here with Stephen Omosi.
Yeah, I'm on the Game Boy VR tip.
The Virtual Boy.
Yeah.
And
that's
Jonathan,
what it was.
yes, and Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I'm still playing my Commodore 64.
Of course you are. And thanks for joining us, and we shall see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you for joining the Lost Signals Games and Gaming Culture. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows and more, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.